Hello, investors. Today on Stocks to Watch, we're spotlighting Sydney Resources Corp., a publicly traded company listed on the OTCID as SDRC. They're focused on precious metals exploration and development in central Idaho, with a growing portfolio of mining claims and an expanding exploration program. Sydney Resources is certainly positioning itself as a notable player in the sector. Joining me today are three key executives leading the company's strategic direction and field work: Sean Ray-Zaleski, Chief Executive Officer; Dan Halley, Chief Operating Officer and Treasurer; and Steve Dobson, Project Geologist. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Yes, very excited to hear your story. Dan, I'll start with you. Earlier this year, you expanded your mining claims in the Warren District of central Idaho. So what would you say are the most attractive and compelling geological features of this district?
Well, a big piece of it is really the historical aspect of the Warren District itself. You know, Warren, they started mining there in 1862 when gold was really discovered there. And what we've done is we looked at there's just a lot of records about the mining that was done. So what we knew is we know that there are multiple veins. We've identified 22, 23 of them, and we continue to identify new veins almost daily. So we looked at all those different historical reports and what was going on in that time frame, clear up until the 1930s when they were mining this. We saw the production veins that didn't dry up, but they were primarily shut down when the Federal Gold Act occurred in the 30s. So we looked at that. We saw that these were high-grade veins. We were looking at primarily narrow veins, large placer deposits, levels of 2 to 7 ounces per ton. There's one of the Little Giant vein had actually produced, 175 ounces of gold in a ton. They had one piece of ore that was 283 ounces of gold in a ton. So there's a lot to that. And a big part of what we started to notice too in the work that we did, once we had Steve in there and Steve started to notice some different things, we discovered that there were platinum group metals there as well. So we started to work to understand the platinum group metals. We're seeing assays from different labs as high as 431 grams to a ton, platinum up to 329 grams to a ton. All of the platinum group elements, the rhodium, the osmium, the ruthenium. So we saw all of these different pieces, and then realizing that this is part of the Idaho, the granite batholith, which was just a huge granite batholith, is one of the largest in the world. And realizing that it hadn't really been studied in really any significance. And years ago, we had another geologist that was there. His name was Richard Morris. And Richard, we worked on a trench project to identify at least the one vein that we were working on. And he put together some inferred estimates, looking at 3 million tons of ore along 9,000 feet at depths of like 800 feet that were high grade. We located 25,000 tons, an estimated 25,000 tons of ore from another system. So we just started seeing this enormous picture about the area. We started really painting this picture. And when we got the lab results or the assay results from some of the different labs on just the ore piles we found, testing out which was the knot, it indicated an estimated 45,000 ounces potentially for gold just within a batch of material. So there was so much significance throughout the district. And one of the unique pieces that we had when Steve came on board was, I refer to Steve. Steve's a field geologist. I mean, this guy, he's a guy that every night is throughout the district examining everything way beyond our claim group. And he just really started putting together the information to paint a good picture about what was there. And, Steve, did you want to add anything about the district?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of a good explanation of what's going on. We're right in the middle of the Idaho batholith, hosted in a big pluton, big quartz monzonite pluton that's cut with a series of parallel shear zones. Within those shear zones, you have hydrothermal fluids that came up, deposited the mineralization within these shears, and that's what we're going after. So, and usually when you get the dynamics of those shears all oriented in one direction, the theory is there's probably a bigger system at depth that formed this stuff. So that's kind of what we're looking at now.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like there is incredible potential here in central Idaho. And Dan, you had mentioned that Steve, exploring beyond the mining claims. Let's talk about the mining claims specifically that Sydney Resources currently holds, and how important are these claims to the company's vision, mission, and obviously operations moving forward?
Well, Sydney really does. We hold a commanding position in the Warren District. When we first started this out, when I first started on this project, we essentially leased 53 acres of private ground, and we had 5 claims that we leased with it. But through all of the research and Steve's work and the work of the team and everybody involved in really understanding the magnitude of the Warren District, we now control over 3,800 acres within the district. I mean, that's a huge increase, and it's a very mineral rich district. The other piece that we've done, which is unique, I think, in a lot of ways in the mining world, is we've acquired 208 acres of private land within those claim groups. And that private land is kind of strategically located within the target area or our claim district. And what that does is that allows us to have operations on private land, which is a big piece. If you really understand, the permitting process and unpatented claims, this gives us a huge advantage really over what most companies have. We still lease the original 53 acres in the small claims. We own 14 out of the original 18, which were the large producing mines in the area. You've got everything from the Little Giant, the Knot, the New Era. There's just mine after mine after mine that were incredibly well known back in their day that we understand. We have 5 mill sites that are within our claim group. We've just done a lot. We picked up all of the assets of Unity Gold, Silver Mine Company. They were one of the largest mining operations in the area. So we've acquired all of their assets. We have the Silver Monarch that we acquired in Q1 of 2025. So we've done really a tremendous amount of expansion, but we've done it strategically. We've got, we're still figuring out the total lengths, but, on just the Little Giant, we originally knew that was over 9,000 feet in length from some trench work that Richard Morris did. You're looking at inferred reserves just on that alone from what Richard Morris put. And he used a lot of historical data, a lot of sampling, hundreds of sampling that was done, the trench stuff that he was done, without even updating the numbers. He was, when you brought him into some, better numbers as gold continues to increase, he was looking at over, 8.7 billion if it all came in what he believed was inferred. So it's really a significant piece that we own and that we control. And we've been very strategic about how we've done it.
It's also very important to really review that inferred reserve report that Steve Dobson co-authored as well. That when you look at that asset, we're looking at a huge amount, 11.5 million ounces of silver and 2.8 million ounces of gold in that inferred reserve report. But that was just one vein. In addition to that, that was one vein at a depth of 800 feet in that report. So with Steve's conversation with Dr. Marissa Acosta out of University of Alaska Fairbanks, there's a belief by that geological team that this system is deeper and at depth it gets wider, so it's more minerally rich. So if we update that value just at 800 feet for inflation and the increase of the value of those commodity assets, we're sitting at over 11 billion on that one vein. And now we have the contiguous aspect of that vein on the Unity acquisition for another 9,000 or 10,000 feet. So just the extrapolation of that doubles. Now we have 22 of those, which Steve and his expertise with other geologists, we've had various meetings with different labs. And the general belief of this system is that this is one vein that over the last several 100 million years has fractured and split, and through tectonic movement become the district, right? So it was one system, and now it's fractured to this 22, 23 pieces, which is why we find these chutes on different angles of what it is we're digging. Recently this year, we were just creating a tailings pond, right? A captive tailings pond for doing more work. And lo and behold, we hit another offshoot of the vein, which is a great problem to have. And Steve actually identified that as we were doing it, grabbed some of the aggregate material. And Steve, I apologize. What was the run on that? 100 pounds of material. What was the density of that asset?
The vein that we cut when we were excavating the tailings pond, definitely gold bearing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I didn't get any numbers on it. I went in and sampled it. Yeah. I bulk sampled the thing and definitely free milling gold in the system. That's part of the vein system. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because what we had done is we went back and sampled some of the material that we'd moved out and actually used as like roadbed material. And we were able to recover from that. What was it? Essentially, I know it was over a gram of just coarse gold. So that's the kind of stuff that we see down there. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, impressive. I was going to say, thinking about Steve as he's down there, and Sean Ray is explaining it. And I just think you hit this one thing and then you see another thing. So, Steve, it's got to be fascinating for you to see this just really powerful imagery there. And I'll just throw this question out there, next steps, expected timeline for advancing the mining claims?
Well, as far as, we're continually evaluating. So, we're in the process where, we're building the test mill facility. We're expanding that. So from a timeline perspective, it's just ongoing right now. We continue to evaluate. And part of the process too, which helps people understand when you're evaluating these types of processes and movement forward, we're in a remote area. That there is no power, there's no electrical power. We have to deal with water issues. We have those kind of things from a timeline. So it's just a constant move forward. Everything that we have going. That it's just an ongoing process down there. We're constantly evaluating. We're evaluating the entire district. We have a lot of different things going on. We have a roadmap that we've put in place. We're, as I mentioned, we've expanded. We have a lab now. We used to have a lab up there on site, which was a great lab to work in, wasn't it, Steve? It was a little difficult, but we have a lab in Emmett, which is down in Gem County. We've purchased a lot of equipment, everything from high temperature smelting furnaces. We have a Shimatsu XRF that we use, which helps us get a lot more immediate data instead of having to wait, for results. So we're doing those types of things. we're expanding the current mill capacity that we have right now. We're in the process of that. So that whole piece, we did all of our new claims. We added the last batch we added 92 claims that we added. Those weren't part of a purchase. We did land acquisitions. We're getting ready to do a geophysics survey, an air survey. So that's coming up here. We're looking at what results we'll get from that. That's going to then help to identify those drill targets as we work to better understand the area. So, and it's just an ongoing process. There's 100 years essentially of research that was done by previous miners. We get a piece, and so we evaluate all those historical records that help us make the decisions that we're making. And then the other piece that we have that's coming up, that's an ongoing process, is working towards becoming a full SEC reporting company, which is a big piece because we're actually on OTC ID is what it's referred to now, which is, kind of a step above the pink. But we really want to scale up the output of what our capacity is on site and then just continue to evaluate how we can expand that with the resources that are available in the area.
Okay, fantastic. Sounds like there is a lot in the pipeline. So Sean Ray, I'd ask you, beyond this incredibly strong portfolio, what additional factors would you say makes Sydney Resources a really strong investment case today for those watching and listening?
Absolutely. So we're very early in the process of what this region will become. So we have the obvious gold and silver history of the region, and our assays from multiple labs prove that out in a redundant and scientific method. We have the confounding variables of the platinum group metals, which have been substantiated and confirmed again by multiple assays and labs throughout the region. And then we have the rare earth component, which is, both gargantuan to the defense industry, aerospace, as well as semiconductors. So that's huge. All of these are present in this region, that batholith, if you will. And the porphyry zone that is being discovered here, which is why the University of Alaska Fairbanks was in the region, right? So with that attention, we did that defensive claiming group to protect the company's future, because we knew as this information became public, there'd be more interest. Mm-hmm. And recently that did happen. A billionaire, Thomas Kaplan, came in with his company and claimed 400 acres and then expanded that to 4,000. So to the northeast of us for the rare earth components. So we are aware of that competition. I think that's a great thing, right? That substantiates the value of the region. Other people who are in that industry, Thomas Kaplan's history is absolutely brilliant. His commodity plays from the 90s till today are perfect. No one has done it better, right? So his partners are incredible. We're glad we're ahead of that curve. So we'll continue to do our own expansion. We're speaking with other regional players on their private land as well as public land that they control, whether that were for lumber rights or whatever else in the region. So we continue to make those acquisitions to continue to defend against that encroachment to the region, as well as that participation. There's always joint venture opportunities. We have knowledge of the region that they don't. I welcome those, parlays, if you will, to see how we can be collaborative. That's the most advantageous aspect of my network, and how I've learned to enjoy the game of business is through collaboration. Everyone can win. And we have a lot of great material. We have a lot of great data. We have a great team, and we'll continue to expand that in a capacity that is really world changing. So we started at a sleepy hole, right, on a mountain that Dan had dug and climbed through and almost gotten stuck 20 years ago. And we've taken that vision of the idea that this is something, and we found so much that substantiates it. So as we continue to grow, continue to prove out, we're aggregating a 5 kilogram sample of rare earths right now with a target of 50% concentration for a local offtake agreement. It's taken a little time to get to, but that's a huge opportunity to work with rare earths nationally. We're meeting with global players in that space in both the platinum groups and the other side of that, which is the rare earths. And the gold is a huge boon, billions of dollars boon, hundreds of billions of dollars. But we couple all these together, and we have a region that not only changes Idaho, but it changes the control of Asia's influence of rare earths on North America. So with that coupling of resource control, we will be very impactful to the future. And with a market cap at around $200 million on, it's October 7th I'm recording this, we are a relative small player with an expansion base of $100 billion of, extrapolated inferred values. If I take 22 times just that old number of 8 from when it was first written, now it's at 11 because of the increase of these metals. That's going to continue. And I don't want to get bogged down in the economics of why, but we've printed a lot of money. QE across the world, quantitative easing has engaged at a much greater pace than the commodity values have increased. So if you look at money supply in the last 20 years, it's increased by over 90%. The value of the assets have not increased by that much. So we'll have to catch that up for the real assets in the world. And that will continue. And as we prove this at depth, that porphyry system, under the belief of the experts, not me, is that there'll be a great deal of copper there as well. If you look at the studies, there isn't enough copper in the world to meet our needs for expansion of the electrical networks that we need. So all these pieces are redundant and incredibly important and impactful to the future of our world. And if you look at the semiconductor space, we're even more important there. The defense space, right? Look at the engines and the pieces that need these incredibly hard elements, iridium, et cetera. The rare earths that I can't pronounce and I won't pretend to, right? They're all very important. So all that data is there. So it's incredible. I'm incredibly excited to be a part of this journey. We have built a great flagship to be in a great private position, which is huge in the mining world. We can access these claims through private land, which protects us from so many different things, allows us to have so much more lateral engagement of the region. And then as we look at other opportunities, through our president of the company, various, data centers or power centers that can be included in this region. So we can work harder to create a better vision for the future, utilizing these areas, being a remote data center, looking at SMRs, looking at solar, geothermal, all those combined to create the power needed for what this region is going to be. And we have all those assets that make it very viable and very, very, very profitable, right? So, in general, I don't want to go too much into it, but I'm so excited about the future of this company. We are just at the very, very tip of that spear. And the valuation that we sit at today is a very minor number in the total extrapolated value. And I've told this before in interviews, take our numbers, take the worst ones, extrapolate them by the size of the region, the depth of the region, run them at 800 feet, at 1600 feet, at 3000 feet. Throw it into Grok, ChatGPT, whichever one you like, throw the numbers there, understand how conal systems work, understand that they expand at depth, and look at the difference in values. Even at 800 feet, this is a multi-billion-dollar region, right? There's a reason why a billionaire came in, and I'm so excited we were here first. So we're gonna do a great job. I look forward to working with Thomas. I look forward to working with Sunshine Refineries, everybody, to make sure that this project goes forward. And as our consultants and lobbyists continue to work with Washington, Senator Risch has been great with us. He's really helped us out, move forward with some issues that came out of DOGE just for the region. So we thank, the senator for his time and his help with that. And we'll continue to work with the various governments, whether it be local, tribal, and NGOs, to make sure that we are doing exactly what we need to do to move forward on both the conservation side, the water side, and the public, to make sure we're cleaning this up. Because we also have 300,000 tons of mining waste, which, as you look at the critical minerals publications, that's where we know a lot of these assets are. So we have 300,000 tons of material to work with as a cleanup remediation effort without any worry about, are we mining too deep? Are we hitting a water group? We're fixing a problem. And there's so much of that in conjunction with what we're doing. So as we move forward with Western Frontier and our various partners, we will continue to win.
Certainly. And it certainly sounds like you're hitting all the marks, and love the teaser at the end here. Oh, there's a little bit of copper. You're hitting the rare earths. You're talking about critical minerals. You're talking about your relationships in Washington. It really sounds like you are truly poised for a big success here in the future. And you already have been very successful, it sounds like to me. So I hope that investors find this interview very compelling and look up your story. That wraps up our conversation with the leadership of Sydney Resources Corp. Again, on the OTC is SDRC. For more information on the company's projects, exploration updates, investor materials, visit sydneyresources.com. And thank you all for joining us here on Stocks to Watch. We certainly appreciated your time.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks.
Thank you.